Hello, and welcome to the Finding the Unicorn in You podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jaime Raigosa, here to help you unlock your unique potential and thrive into your career. Get ready to explore inspiring stories and practical strategies that will empower you not only to prevent burnout, but also achieve sustainable success. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Finding the Unicorn in You. This week, we have another conference clip. I hope you really enjoyed the one from a couple weeks ago. This time, we are going to dive into how to be more assertive and in the workplace, especially in the Latino community and people of color. So this conference was presented in Texas, last month in San Antonio, and it was for the National Latino Behavioral Health Conference, one of my favorite conferences to go. If you have not gone to this or had the privilege of attending, definitely look it up. It's one of the best, most inspiring conferences as a Latino that I've ever gone to, and it really does get me remotivated every time because there's so many wonderful speakers, so many wonderful topics, and you just see so many other people that care about mental health, wellness, social work, and it's just a beautiful place to be to kind of socialize and network. So in this topic, I did talk about how to be able to be more assertive, be more confident, being able to negotiate for yourself. And the biggest takeaway was that you have to love yourself and you have to be able to put yourself first in order for you to be successful in the workplace. But I'm just going to go ahead and roll the clip so you listen more of it. If you have any questions, like as always, send me a DM on Instagram or shoot me an email at jgraigosa@rainbowcareercoaching.com. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and roll the clip. I hope you really enjoy it, and I'll see you next week. So my name is Dr. Jaime Raigosa. I am a business and career development coach as well as a human and organizational psychologist. I studied employee retention, burnout, motivation, and kind of how that affects with the generations, with different ethnicities in the workplace. So today what we're going to be talking about is developing assertiveness in order to stand up for yourself in the workplace. As of 2021, the U.S. Census Bureau mentioned that 18.9% of the U.S. population was primarily Hispanic, and it keeps growing every year. And this is only people that were eligible to do the U.S. Census Bureau. This doesn't include anybody who was undocumented or anybody who just refused to do the U.S. Census Bureau. So this could be like a lot bigger. So 62% of Hispanics have mentioned in a recent study that they felt discrimination in the workplace. And this is only Hispanics. So if we start adding other ethnic minorities in there, we'll have a larger percentage. And these are only people that were willing to say that they have faced discrimination. So this number can potentially be bigger. One of the things that happens is that, I'll tell you a little bit about my story right now. One of the things that happens is that depending on how you grew up, your cultural background, your religious stance, the people you were surrounded with, whether you were a one-parent household, two-parent household, that will determine the way that you are. It determines your behavior, the way you think, the way you're going to act, and the way that you're going to handle conflict. The way I grew up in a 2% household where my dad was breadwinner, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I was taught that men had to be the one to kind of get things across. However, the way that you became successful in life was by working, being quiet, and doing as you're told. You never had to say anything about it. You never complained about work, because if you complained, you were weak. If you expressed your feelings, you were lesser than. If you cried, forget it. You're no longer a man. Those are words from my father. So when I went into the workforce, I had that mentality. I had a supervisor who was heavily racist and would make all of the Hispanics clean the bathrooms. All people that were of other ethnicities will be doing other tasks. When one of my coworkers asked, why is it that you always have Hispanics doing the janitorial duties and not everybody else? Well, they're good at it. That's what they're good for. At that time, I felt very bothered by it, but I didn't know what to say. And the words of my father was, just stay quiet. You shouldn't say anything. Be thankful that you have a job. And that kept going and going and going for 3 years. And it wasn't until one of my colleagues convinced me to say, hey, we should speak up about this and go to HR. And we went, and the person got written up and fired because there were several other people, not only Hispanics, that came up with claims about her, and she was let go. And that was the first instance when I was like, you know what, I have a voice and I should make it heard. So it is super important as Latinos and as people of color to express their needs, their wants, how they're feeling in the workplace, because it creates a sense of belonging. It creates a sense of, you know, I deserve to be respected, and it shows that you have rights. It all starts with us. If we don't believe that we naturally belong here, in our place of work, in this country, in your city, then you're not gonna express those feelings out. So it starts with us. You have to believe it, that wherever you're at, it belongs. There's this common phrase that you probably all heard, imposter syndrome, that comes to mind whenever we start a new job. Whenever we start something scary, we sometimes feel, you know what, I should keep my box of stuff ready just in case they find out I'm a fraud and I shouldn't. But that is something that everyone feels. It's not just one person, and it's not something that goes away with time. It's just something that kind of happens in the back of your mind until you start believing, I'm good enough. I respect my skill set, I respect my knowledge, and as long as I try every single day, I will be good. And that's something you have to start kind of ingraining into your mind every day to be able to help you get over that. So in a cultural context, like I said, there's certain cultural barriers that does limit us to be able to be assertive and communicate these type of emotions to ourselves and to others. So we'll dive into that a little bit deeper. And if we start being more assertive, it will lead to career advancements because it creates confidence, it creates good communication skills, and it shows people that you are competent. There's 3 main types of communication styles. As I say these, I want you to start thinking of people in your mind, like people around you that you think, oh, this person has that communication style and whatnot. So the first one is assertiveness. Like I said, it's a positive form of expression. It's the way that you balance your needs, the respect with others, promotes constructive and productive interactions with people. The next one is aggression. We probably recognize this one, right? Where people come in a very loud voice. They sometimes go through an intimidation. They kind of tell you how things are supposed to do. It's do as I say, not as do as you're told, not as I do. And they disregard everybody's opinions. What they do is right, and that's it. As a Hispanic, not to throw my mother under the bus, but my mom was always like, cállate, don't say anything, calladito te miras más bonito. Being quiet, you look a lot better. You know, a lot cuter. And it was something that kind of was ingrained in me, but that's because she was taught that the only way that people respect her was if she was aggressive. Because that was the only way that my father paid attention, because she started passive, where it was very timid, quiet. I'm, yes, sir, yes, do this. But my father always ignored her, so she then transitioned to starting to yell, and that's when my father started to listen. So then she's like, this is the communication style I have to do, you know? So when I started growing, I went with this one, and then I transitioned to this one, but then now I'm here. So it is a little bit, and you can switch over time, depending on your circumstances, your surroundings, and your situation. But assertiveness is the way to go because it's the more respectful one, and it's the one that will get you further, and you'll make more connections and networks, and people actually want to be with you. So think to yourselves, what is your communication style right now? If you had to like base it off of like what you just learned, what are some communication styles that you feel you have, or is it a mix of a few? Mix?
It depends on the situation. Depends on the situation and what.
Okay, depends on the situation who you're talking to. That's a good one.
I realize like if I'm in a professional setting, I can be very assertive, aggressive, depending on who I'm with. Like, but if I'm with my parents, very passive.
That's a good point. It really depends on who you're with, and then also the level of connection you have with them. Yeah, that's good. Anybody else?
Passive assertiveness.
Passive assertiveness? Okay. And is that based on context, or is it pretty standard?
Context being mostly white environments.
Okay,
So I'm the safe person of color. So
that makes sense. So now what I want you to think about is who taught you that communication style? Where did that come from? Like, if you really think back, was there a certain instance where you learned, like kind of like my mom, this is the way I get listened to, and then that's how you adopted? Because the way in order for you to start change, and positive change that actually is sustainable, is to think back and think, when did this behavior originate? Once you start making those connections, then you can truly understand whether or not this type of behavior benefits you and it's helping you grow, or if it's holding you back, and what are some things you need to tweak. So kind of keep that in mind and do that self-reflection later. I won't do that deep work now, but if not, this will be like a 3-hour session. But just start thinking about those things, because those are really, really important, and that's what helped me to be able to be more assertive, more patient, and more respectful. So a little bit more details, and you can kind of take a look at the screen on the different types of qualities that each one has. So like for passive, very scared to say what you think, avoids eye contact, speaks very softly, reduces on their own self-esteem, they feel like they may not be good enough. For assertiveness, you express yourself very clearly, you make eye contact, speaks firmly, it also helps you increase your self-esteem, can say no in a calm and direct way. Aggressive, very closed posture, usually arms closed, hands to themselves. If they're sitting down, feet wide and open, you're trying to make yourself bigger than the other person. You put your needs first, and you say no in a very aggressive style, and you always aim to win. Your stance is, if the only way I'm going to get my point across and the only way I'm going to be happy at the end of this conversation is if I'm the winner. Versus an assertive, you try to express your needs in a positive way and find a compromise. And in passive, you always let the other person win, because you already feel that your voice doesn't matter, or you feel that just to get it to stop, you're like, I'm just gonna let them win and be the bigger person. How many times have we told ourselves that? I'm gonna be the bigger person and just let it go.
I tried.
So ask yourself next time, by me being the bigger person and letting it go, is it me being passive, or is it me being assertive and actually making a compromise? Because if you're making a compromise because you know this conversation isn't going to go anywhere, then you're being assertive. If you're letting it go because you're trying to avoid the conflict, then you're being passive. So it all really goes back with the intent. So this is the cultural considerations that, and it's not just only for the Latinx community, but for other sub-communities as well. So there's different cultural barriers that may limit you to be assertive. So traditional values respect humility and may discourage assertive behavior. Like I said, my father always told me, never disrespect your employers because they know best. They know better than you, they've been there longer than you, so all you have to do is stay and listen. Sometimes fear of being perceived as disrespectful and confrontational. I'm a naturally loud person. I laugh very loud, I speak very loud, and people know me as soon as I enter the building. They're like, oh, Highness here. You know? But some people consider that as being dramatic, or being like the person that stands out, trying to draw attention. But one thing that I learned a long time ago, if someone says that you're being too much, then ask them to go seek less. Don't. And if that's an environment that's asking you consistently day after day that you should be less, then that means you outgrew that environment. It's time for you to go somewhere else. Just because you are too much for someone doesn't mean that you are too much. It just means that, you know, that you no longer fit in that small bubble of theirs. So you have to continue expanding. Yes?
If my shines bother you, wear some sunglasses.
I like that. That's a really good one. I'm gonna start using that one. Sometimes we can be blinding, but it's not our fault, right? It's not we're doing it on purpose. It's just the way that we are. And then you should not be subconscious for being yourself. If you're ever feeling like I'm being too much, I should change this, I should change this about me. No, as long as if you're being respectful, if you're authentically trying to be yourself and you're doing it in a manner where you're not being rude or aggressive, don't be ashamed of it. It's just you. You have to be able to be comfort, and this is where a lot of the work happens. It's a lot of that self-reflection to say, I'm okay with me and I'm happy with me. So whatever everybody else says around me, you know, unless it's something like, hey, you hurt my feelings, and talk about it. But if it's something disrespectful that's not constructive criticism, then let it go and let them handle with their insecurities. You go on with your life. Other barriers that could potentially affect the way that you communicate and your level of assertiveness: childhood trauma, workplace trauma, behavioral health issues, personality relationships, lack of role models, and past negative experiences. One of the things that we talk about is about childhood trauma, but a lot of people don't talk about, and there's very little research on trauma that occurs in the workplace. Workplace trauma is one of the biggest trauma that therapists today are dealing, especially post-pandemic, and it increases. A lot of people are getting diagnoses because of the pandemic, because of the work from home conditions, because of the very strict forced change from work from home back into in-person. A lot of people are having neurological problems with that adaptation. So that's something to kind of take into place. And also, if you're really having a lot of PTSD from that transition, from what happened, or if you had long COVID, or if you had COVID and it really affected you, those are things that are going to affect you in the long term. You may not notice it, but it does affect your workplace environment as well. So besides the barriers I already said, maybe think personally, what are some reasons you think, some barriers that influence your communication style?
When we get triggered maybe by our emotions, depending on the situation. We can get, I'm a crier when I'm upset. So then I'm trying to keep myself calm to have the conversation.
Yeah, so the way that you, basically the stimulus is around you, and then the way that you react to those stimuluses, that's a big one.
I feel like I would also say religious trauma can sometimes affect, especially depending on the gender. Women who follow religious aspects are more submissive than assertive.
It really depends on the religious, the way you got brought up.
If English is not your first language.
Yep, if English is not your first language, that can be a lot, because sometimes you're not confident in the way that you speak. Maybe you have a stutter. Maybe you, for me, sometimes I switch my Spanish turns on, and I start. I don't even realize it, and I start speaking Spanish and English at the same time, every other word, and people are like, "Hey, stop." That's a good one.
That we're doing our best to bring our communities in, but in the certain terminology or language is pushing them away.
I consult with a lot of nonprofits, mainly in California, but one of the ways that we handled that was always asking instead of assuming, how do you wish to identify? And identity is really big for me, because it's one of the only things that I know I own for sure. It's me. No one else can tell me how I identify. It's me. And the thing is that people, you can't assume just because they're from a certain class, a different subgroup, that, oh, they're going to identify like that. The thing is that, and the easiest way I can explain this, my name is Jaime. It irks seeing people call me Jane. And it's something that always happens. When I was younger, I let it slide. But now that I'm older, people say, "Hey, Jamie," I was like, "Oh, it's actually Dr. Jaime. It's Jaime." And then they're like, "Oh, it's fine. It's easier for me to say." Your level of comfort is not going to make me respected. So you have your comfort is not bigger than my respect. In order for you to treat me like an individual and show me that you respect me, acknowledge me as a human being, choose to name me the right way. I'm choosing to say your name correctly, your pronouns, your ethnicity, whatever it may be correctly. Do the same for me. And that's what it comes down to, showing respect to the other people and showing that at least you're caring by asking. And just don't assume, and just ask, okay, so these are the things that are here. How do you wish to identify? Look through these lists. If none of these are here, then you can write or choose to decline. And if they choose to decline, respect that and don't force them.
Something that for me has been a challenge, and I think I'm doing better, but is when people try to, in order to be more accepted and independent of my identity, I like to share the feelings or experience, things like that, and then people just say, "Oh, but don't take it too personal." And to me, that's a way, that put me down, put, what I'm saying down, or the same that the other person was saying. When, for me, I don't see myself talking loud, but I'm passionate when I talk about that. So they say, "Oh, don't take it personal. Oh, don't be so passionate about it." So you just, again, depending on the triggers at the moment, sometimes you can be assertive, but sometimes you can be aggressive, you can be passive.
You can communicate that. Nothing good comes out from, I'm not racist, but, or, I'm not trying to offend you, but if you have to put that disclaimer, don't say it. That's what I tell people. As soon as I hear that statement come in, I was like, choose wisely what you're about to say, because what you're about to say is probably going to offend me, and we're probably not going to leave in a good interaction. So, do you still want to say what you want to say? And then most of the time they don't. so just stop it from there, because like I said, you're allowing yourself to be treated that way. Don't. If they say something, speak about it right then and set your boundary clear. Very good communication. I love the involvement. So overcoming barriers. So you have to be able to show respect and clear communication. Like I said, try to be assertive, be confident in you, set those proper boundaries, and add the little tips that we can add here. Do a lot of self-reflecting on what those barriers that you have, like we mentioned, so that you can start doing that internal work, whether it's childhood trauma, whether it's just cultural differences, whatever it may be, and then start really seeing if the behaviors you have are truly serving you. Try to find role models and mentors. If there's someone that you feel is very assertive and you're like, I look up to you, like I want to be like you, talk to them, involve yourself. You become the person close based on the 10 closest people you surround yourself. So if you want to see who you truly are, look at the 10 people that you contact the most. Their personalities, or little bits of theirs, are your personalities. Because there's a reason you keep them. And we shape each other and we influence each other every single day. So if you want to become a better person, start surrounding yourself with people who you want to be like. So somebody mentioned this, making I statements is a good one. So a good way to be able to be assertive is by saying, focus on yourself and not the other person. So if somebody says something offensive or does something that did not settle right with you, then set that boundary and let them know how you feel by saying how you feel. So I have an example here of someone who kind of ignored them while they were on the computer. So this is something I get a lot. People are on the computer, somebody comes in, they don't even like take the time to look over. They're like, okay, tell me what you're trying to say. Or you're on a Zoom call and you obviously see that their eyes are somewhere else and they're not paying attention to you. I always say, okay, let's put our phones down. Let's try to like make eye contact. Based on like the interaction we had when you were looking at the computer, I felt like I wasn't being respected, and it may not be what you intended, but this is the way I felt. I felt that I wasn't worth your time. And then having that open dialogue will start that conversation with the person. But also acknowledging that I don't want to assume this, but this is the way you make me feel. You know, can we please talk about this? Because I don't want this to repeat it, because if this continues, I can see this being hurtful for me in the long run. And then starting that dialogue like that. So another thing is when, what, and how statements. So trying to always say when it happened, try not to be vague. One of the things that people lose respect is when you overgeneralize. You always do that. You know, every time that I come into this house is never clean. Every time that I come into the room, you're always on the computer. You know, every time that I do this, it's very big overgeneralizations instead of very specific times. You know what, yesterday when you were in that conference room, I noticed that you were on your phone the whole time and you weren't paying attention during our meetings. Can we please discuss in maybe future not to put your phone away so that we can be respectful to the presenter? And a very specific time frame so they know, oh, this is when it happened. Because if you overgeneralize and they don't know an exact date or time, they'll think that you're just either making stuff up or you're overgeneralizing, or they'll feel like, I don't always do this, it was that one time type of situation. So it's always good to be specific and say when, what exactly. Don't just say you always do, you're always mean. What does that mean? Okay. You know? So like that tone of voice, the way you mentioned it was very disrespectful. I felt that you increased it when we hit this topic. You know, so what about that topic making me upset? How can we stop from this happening again? And then how? Example. Yesterday, this is the when. When we were facing your computer while I was talking to you, that's the what. I felt like you weren't listening to me. So when, what, and how. Very easy to do, hard to miss. For me, I still fall into this trap where I always miss the when. I'm really good at the how and the what, but the when is the one that I'm working on. So just always remember to try to write down instances, and I keep a log on my phone. If somebody like during like that I'm working with on a constant basis does something that made me feel a little like unsettling, I write it down how I felt, and then I'll reflect on it later to see what exactly it was. And then when I'm ready to have the conversation, I talk to them. And it's usually within 1 or 2 days, if not that same day. But try to do it at a quick pace. Don't wait like 3 weeks and be like, last month you made me feel like this. You have to do it when it's still fresh and it just happened. So that way they know and they also feel respected. Because if you wait too long, then they'll sometimes it invalidates and they feel like it's invalidated. They're like, that was a long time ago, you should have told me when it happened. So try to build the courage and then try to bring it up. And there's different forms of communication. The whole point is start the communication, lead it into like actual talking in person, or at least face-to-face FaceTime or Zoom call. But always try to at least initiate it If you feel like you have too much nerves to say it in person, send them a text, construct an email, but do it in a way where you're still gonna have the actual conversation, either face to face, virtually, or in person. And just say, hey, can we talk about something? There's something that happened yesterday that I would like to discuss. Plain and simple. You don't have to go into full detail. And then that way you can at least start the conversation so you have a date to actually talk about it. Next thing is improving your listening skills. One thing's communicating, another thing's actually listening. So you also have to be receptive to what they have to say. So yes, your feelings are valid, but also their feelings are also valid. Sometimes we try to go into the defensive side because that aggressive style comes in where we're like, no, you just invalidated my feelings by saying your feelings. No, two sides of the coin can still be true. They could have been offensive and they could have honestly not meant it. You know, it doesn't mean it's correct. There's still a way to change the behavior, but it's you still have to validate both sides. So the first thing is mirror. So mirror in their own words what you understood. So when they talk to you, it's reflective listening. Repeat what they said to make sure that you understood it correctly. So what you're mentioning, what you just told me is that you feel disrespect every time that you come talk to me that I'm on the computer. Is that correct? Did I get that correct, or did I misunderstand them? So that way, if it is a miscommunication, they can correct you and be like, that's not what I meant. I meant to say this. Second is validate their expressions. Thank you so much for telling me that. I respect the fact that that you were brave enough to talk to me and start this conversation with me. Let's try to see if we can solve this. You're validating that what they're saying is good. You're not saying like, well, I didn't mean to do that, blah, blah. No, first validate before you start the actual compromise. Then from there, compromise and find a goal in between. This is where a lot of the negotiation happens. But you have to be open and willing to meet them halfway in order to do that. Any questions so far? Yeah.
Well, I have noticed that when I mirror, sometimes like if you're having an argument and you repeat, even like this exact same words that they told you, they get upset. Like, no, that's not what I'm saying, but I the exact same words. What can you do in that case? Like,
yeah, so don't repeat exactly what they said, like don't parrot what they say, but summarize it in your own words. So, and then saying, okay, just so we can clarify, I want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. What you're saying is this. And then summarize it in 1 or 2 sentences of what they said. Don't say, well, and say word for word everything. Yeah.
okay, and I have another question. When you have like a leadership that is more like maybe following a command or more like maybe aggressive communication, how can you approach, let's say, when I bring up something or a change or something?
If someone is, so first try to go in with just saying, hey, I would like to have like a one-on-one with you just to kind of discuss a couple things that have been bugging me. Can we have some time privately to talk? And then write down everything that you want to say, because sometimes in the heat of the moment, you forget. So that way you have an agenda, and if you want to even have that ready, have it printed out so both of you can have it. And then when you sit down, don't give it beforehand, give it during that time, and be like, I'm coming in with the space and intention to try to clear the air and trying to move past this because I just want to feel comfortable in the workplace. By no means am I trying to disrespect you and saying that you're a bad person. I don't think that. I just want to say that these behaviors don't resonate well with me, and I want to see how can we meet maybe a middle ground or find your intention behind these so that we can feel and do better. As long as you're going in with a very wholesome response, that would be good. If after you come with that response, they're still being aggressive and assertive and they're just dismissing you, then have a third-party mediator come in. That's where HR needs to get. Because at least you're the one attempting to fix the problem, and that needs to be documented. Document. As you know, in social work, if it's not documented, it never happened. So make sure at the end of that meeting, you send a follow-up email. These are the points I discussed. This was the resolution, which was X, Y, and Z. I just wanted to confirm if you got anything different from it. And then have that paper trail for yourself, because you also need to protect yourself. Stop unproductive conversations. So if somebody, like I said, starts being disrespectful to you, just say, I feel like we're going in circles. Can we take a break and come back to this later when we both had a chance to cool off? And that's perfectly fine. I have a rule that whenever somebody's mad at me, if we're gonna start saying meaningful and hurtful things, let's take a pause. Doesn't mean that we're gonna forget about this, but I set a follow-up date. Okay, seems like we're not getting anywhere. Seems like we're both heated. How about we circle back and we come back this either later today or tomorrow? Don't just say, okay, leave, and then, not have an exact date and time when you're gonna circle back and talk about it again. But at least you're saying like, hey, I'm getting being knowledgeable of yourself too. Because you know when your breaking point is. I'm trying to reach my breaking point, and I feel like at this point I'm not gonna be as productive, and I don't wanna be disrespectful, and I wanna respect your time. So how about we take a break? Same thing if you know let somebody else reach their breaking point, then start having those boundaries and those conversations. So I've talked about compromise a little bit and negotiation. I do have my email at the end if you want a copy of this, I can email it to you. So feel free, and I have my cards in the back. Just send me an email and I'll, so don't feel like you have to write everything down. So like I said, do practice active listening, stay calm and composed, be open to different perspectives, focus on the future, not the past. If you already settled something, leave it in the past. You know, people are not, or you should define your experience based on the current situation. If there's something in the past that was unresolved, bring it. But if it was already talked about, don't bring it back. There's no point, you know? If it's a repeating behavior, then mention, hey, we talked about this before. I noticed you're repeating it again. Is there something that was not clear from last time and what we agreed upon, or do we need to retouch that? But if it's not because of that, you just want to kind of, you know, you just have to see what is your intent. Is my intent to fix, or is my intent to kind of be like, I'm gonna use this as a weapon to win? So you have to be mindful of those things. And that's, be creative about finding solutions. As long as you're trying to be open-minded and trying to find a solution that is gonna fit both of you, you're gonna be in a good spot. So what strategies have you utilized when you have personally negotiated or compromised with people?
I read the book, Negotiate Like You Matter. And having that concept in my mind helped a lot before I went in, and I said, that's it. I am doing this duty. This is what I've been doing. I deserve the respect to continue to do the work I'm doing. And I need your support.
That's a really good one. And I think what you said is very, very important. You have to keep yourself in mind. You have to know what the end goal is whenever you go into a negotiation with anybody. What is my desired outcome? And what is the outcome that I'm not willing to go away with? Once you know those two, then you know where in the middle you can kind of meet. So if the outcome is I'm gonna do nothing and keep things as is, your feelings are invalid, no. Don't leave that conversation and say, okay, if this is the end of the time, we're gonna circle back and touch this again because I'm not happy with what this outcome is.
Yeah, I think what has worked for me too is that just how we assume that someone's a certain way, we can't just let other people assume that they know what our needs are. It's a constant thing that you have to reevaluate yourself of your own personal needs and professional needs and bring them up if you feel that they're not being met. And that's how you know you need to bring them up, because you feel frustrated that those needs, your body and your mind is so good at telling you what you need. And sometimes we mute, we kind of just go mode, go, and we don't stop to kind of just come and think about how we can meet these needs, not just because we are meant to meet our own needs, but because others are there to meet those needs, especially in a professional setting. They're in that position, they're in that leadership role because they're meant to lead. And sometimes we forget, we kind of shy away, going back to the whole how our parents raised us, or certain traumas, like how we view people. It's sometimes in our heads, and we have the opportunity to address that, because that's not how they are, that's not how we are or want to be. So I think you really emphasized on communication is key.
Yeah, essentially. And what you said is very important. Sometimes when we go through certain our day-to-days, we feel very stressed, and we feel like this pit in our stomach, and we're like, oh, today's just a nasty day. If you're feeling like that, take a pause. Why is today a nasty day? What exact things happened today that made me feel, that led up to this? And then write them down. That way you can identify what the problem is. A lot of the times we ignore our feelings and we ignore our body, and we refuse to do it because we're so used to just pushing it aside, put it in that complaint bucket in ourselves until it overfills, and then we explode. But we have to daily ask ourselves, I do journaling every single day. What was the good thing today, and what was the bad thing today? And how can I make tomorrow better? And if I notice in my bad list, there were certain interactions that weren't good, that's where I write, and I do follow-ups with those individuals to try to address them right away. But if you're not constantly reflecting, you don't know what's wrong until it's too late. A lot of the times people in the mental health field go through compassion fatigue because we keep shoving our feelings down and we don't allow ourselves to actually feel and process them in the moment. So take time, even if it's for 5 minutes in the car, as you're sitting down, getting ready to drive home, or during your drive home, ask yourself the questions. How did I feel today? Was today a good day? Was today a bad day? Was there anyone that made me feel lesser than today? Was there a certain interaction that made me feel icky today? And then write those feelings down and then make an action plan to actually address them instead of just saying like, it is what it is. That is my worst phrase ever. And that's one of the things my supervisors just tell me. It is what it is. The CEO is like that. You just have to kind of deal with it. No.
So when the pandemic happened, a lot of us went to work virtually, or maybe hybrid, or maybe we have like the back-to-back meetings or client sessions, etc. And one of the things that I brought to like our department-wide meeting was with like data to back it up was, hey, in these back-to-back, when we have so many back-to-back meetings or occurrences, events, etc., like your brain focuses less, etc. And we had a discussion, and so now our meetings will start either like at least 5 minutes after, like 10 minutes. Instead of having a 9, 10, 11 meeting, it's like 9:05, 9:10 to give us that brain, for that brain fog. And that has really helped kind of going back to the planning, like, okay, being ready for the meeting, what are my points, what am I going to discuss, where am I going to stand firm on conversation I'm going to have today. And I have a leader, various leaders, but one leader that I work with, more of like an aggressive take to, what she's advocating for. And my team was being asked to like do triple work. And the people that she oversees, we're going to someone also be asked to do like double or triple work. And so the request was for my team to do the triple work, so her team wouldn't have to do additional work. And so when she said, well, I'm not going to ask, my psychiatrist to do the extra work, and I said, well, I'm not going to ask my team to do the work, so what can we do? Where can we come to like a middle point so we don't all have to do the work and can meet the goal for the program? And so her voice got raised. I had to raise my voice a little bit more than what I usually do. But then I was like standing firm on, I'm not moving. But I want us to get to a good resolution that works for us because nobody wants to do the extra work and we need to meet goals regardless. But then that interaction felt good because I was like, I stood firm and no one is doing extra work at this point. But then I feel like she respected that what I had to say, and that's something that I've had to work on with this leader. So it takes time. It's taken time and that practice of feeling confident.
It does. You did a good job in that situation. I have 2 things to tell you. So one, you did mention that she raised your voice. One thing that has worked effectively for me is if they raise your voice, stay quiet, and then say, I just noticed that you raised your voice. Was there something that I said that triggered that? Or did you mean to say that? Because it made me feel a little disrespected at that point. And don't continue the conversation until they reflect on that. Because in that way you stop it right there. And I was like, I'm trying to stay in a calm voice. Can you please stay at my level? And the second thing, I like that you start taking breaks in between. There was a study that just came out in January of this year that it takes the brain, the human mind, 23 minutes to shift from one topic to another. So whenever you get distracted, it takes you 23 minutes to refocus. So that's why it's really good to have at least 30-minute breaks in between meetings because it lets you let go of the old topic and transition into the new one. So something to kind of bring back to your organizations.
I noticed that when trying to negotiate, I would do a lot of comparing. So like, Susan gets to do A, B, and C, so I should be able to do X, Y, and Z. But I actually negotiated to come to this conference, and one of the things that really helped was going back to like the responsibilities of my position and writing down like bullet points, and then really being kind of assertive about why a conference like this would benefit me, my role, kind of how I do my job, the services I bring to the agency and to the clients, and thankfully I have a wonderful director who barely says no to me, so that was a positive too, but that's how I got to be here.
That's good. Making lists, knowing, defining exactly what the end goal of the conversation is perfect. Because that way you're clear, concise, and it shows that you put time into it. Versus if you go in there and just try to make it on the spot, it's a little bit harder. Yes.
So I tend to be able to start off very assertive with conversations with colleagues, supervisor, but I have noticed I will get interrupted a lot, and once I start getting interrupted, then I have a tendency to become more passive and to not kind of push back. So do you have any feedback about how to handle when something like that happens, when someone's interrupting you?
Have you mentioned it when they interrupt you?
No.
So that would be the first thing. Is as soon as it happens, stop, and then say, like, raise your hand or make it known that you want to speak. So if it's virtual, keep that virtual hand up. If it's in person, like either stand up or just like as soon as they do that, it's like, excuse me, I just wanted can you please allow me to finish my statement? I noticed in the past this is something that frequently happens. You talk over me, so if we can at least please, I'll let you speak when it's your turn, but please at least allow me to hear me out so that I can say what I need to say so we can have a very productive mutual conversation and not just one-sided. Yeah, but the key is doing it right then and there. Interruptions is one of the things that's really hard to do after the fact. That has to be done right there.
So, for negotiation, what I do is know your audience. Because I used to be a lot of I would gather my data and I would say they cannot deny the data, but sometimes they don't care. So sometimes they do care, are like, oh, this is undeniable. So if I know the manager or whoever I'm talking, they're more interested maybe in the economical side of the project, or depending what they want, it's good to know what they want, because that way you can kind of present what you want and see how they will benefit from that. And also, it's good, sometimes your supervisors, they have someone they trust. It could be a coworker that they have, they say it, their ear. Who knows? So it's good to know who has the ear of your supervisor or manager, because sometimes if you bring that new thing or topic, whatever, first to that person, and they agree with you, sometimes that's easier because they're gonna be more open to hear it from that person that has their ear.
And that's where the creativity goes in. You have to be able to network and try to create a strong relationships with your coworkers, because if it's an issue that is affecting a lot of y'all, then numbers are speaking power. Especially if you have a leader that is not as receptive, may have a more aggressive stance towards communication, may not listen to data, as you say. So knowing to those networks will be really good. And also, like you said, find out what they care about and then talk about those points. There's always a way to get what you want and find a good compromise, as long as you're finding out what they want. I saw a couple hands over here.
Sorry, just to go back to the question about interruptions. What if you do interrupt politely, but then that just annoys the other person and they start to speak aggressively, but you obviously want to stand your ground but not escalate the situation? Would you recommend something like that?
Stop the conversation. It's kind of like where you have to circle back. So I'm noticing that the voices are getting raised a little bit. Some people are being agitated. Or if it's just you and that person, I've noticed that your voice is being agitated, it's getting higher. I'm not liking that tone of voice, and it's making me feel very uncomfortable. I think I'm gonna have to step out. Maybe we can continue this a little bit later, and then we'll move forward. And you're allowed to end a meeting. Just because they're your manager does not allow them to disrespect you. If they're trying to still talk over you, if it's Zoom, end the call or walk out. And then if you have to involve HR, invite HR. But I said, send an email saying, hey, I had to walk out because I felt attacked. I felt this, and this, but I'm willing to meet again. Because you don't want them to control the narrative. Have a document.
So if we have a pattern of stating or making statements, and then we make that statement and nobody listens, and then somebody else makes the exact same thing, like, you said that and you didn't scare me. Can you diagnose that? What's going on? What could be the issue, and how we can make it so that when we make the statement, we're heard?
So the thing is that sometimes we allow people to ignore us. So if we don't speak up about it, it's a pattern where they're like, I really don't care about this person. It can be something that happened. It can be an underlying issue. I don't try playing devil's advocate on their side. Maybe they didn't hear you. But if it's clearly known and other people heard you and it's being acknowledged and other people are noticing too, let them know. Either in a separate conversation, be like, hey, I noticed that whenever I say something, I'm completely dismissed, somebody else says the same thing. Can you please kind of clarify what's going on? Is there something that I did wrong, or is there something that you want me to do more of? Do you want me to be louder? Like, what can I do so that this doesn't happen again? Because I feel like my opinions don't matter because you keep dismissing me. And then having that conversation with them. A lot of the time, sometimes it's a tiff that they have, and they don't want to confront it because for them that's their coping mechanism, but that's not right for you. So make sure that you voice it out. If they still ignore you, that's when higher ups need to get involved.
I interrupted. I'll come back to finish my thought from earlier. So it's kind of like I'm saying it, but I'm also being understanding. And then if it happens several times, then I'll say like, I've noticed this a couple times, so I'd like to finish now. So it's I'm setting the precedent in a calm, honey kind of way. Same for if someone takes my idea or it's not heard, my style tends to be, that's really similar to what I just proposed, so let me build on that. So it's like, I'm collaborative, I'm not oppositional. And then to answer this question is because of being ignored in the past, I tend to plant little seeds knowing when a negotiation is open. Like, okay, I know it's not right now, so let me just mention this here, let me pepper it so that when it's time to negotiate, it's on their minds. Oh, yes, we briefly mentioned this a couple times, so I know what I'm talking about. So I've had to struggle to get to where I'm at now. So I'm honey. That's why I said passive.
Yeah.
Passive assertiveness. I'm understanding, but also there's a fire here that I'm just not unleashing right now. I've learned better.
And that's really good to get through the conversation, and I love those techniques. However, it's still good to, at the end, still have a conversation with the individual, because sometimes we assume that they got the point, but never assume that they got the point unless you verbally said it. And some people are very, I'm trying to think of the word in English, Spanish, tercos, stubborn. And even though you're being like that, they're gonna label you a certain way that made you different from what your intention was. Be like, hey, I just wanna have a conversation. Notice how I had this pattern of having to repeat myself and having to do this. The reason I did this is because I felt like I was being ignored. Did you were you able to hear me the first time, or, because it happened multiple times. So I just wanna see, what can we do to like make sure that this doesn't happen?
And that's where the agenda idea that you brought up comes in.
Write it down. Continue advocating for yourself, I love that, but still have that conversation at the end, write it down, because you're like, I notice I have to do this over and over again, okay, this is a problem.
Now, something that has helped me about the negotiating or the difficult situation is that having a coach from outside. I just cannot stress how important it is, because, when I'm listening to you, I think it makes sense and we had that aha moment, but when you are in front of a person, it's not that easy. But again, for me, coaching with somebody, talking to somebody and, coaching has worked really well. And the other thing, I don't know if you're going to refer later, but I think has been said a little bit about the imposter syndrome. Because I think, I had 20 plus years of work in the same place, and I mean, I'm happy in general, but depending on the people, because it's anyhow, sometimes, I know there's personal triggers, but sometimes it's the people also that it's a cultural issue could be. So any coping for that,
Yeah, some other people around you are doing things kind of dismissing you or your qualifications, or is that kind of like what I'm hearing? Like, yeah, so if other people are...
I mean, the simple thing I think in general for women and minorities and all that is salaries, for example, or titles, job titles. I work in a university, and so it's just very competitive thing. So, and then, again, and I even not only for me, but for the students too. We have a program for high school prevention, but anyhow, one of the things that we work is about the imposter syndrome in the students, because the first year of college sometimes is critical, because again, they feel they don't belong, they're not supposed to be there, all the type of things. But I realized in working with the youth about that, I realized I was feeling that with me, so that's what I wanted to learn a little bit more about.
I think it's kind of gauging if you were able to have those type of conversations with your administration, if you feel comfortable. And if you've had the conversation, nothing came out of it, it was dismissed, trying to get numbers. So more people that feel the same way, advocating for that voice, that certain thing definitely helps. And if you notice that it is a male and female issue, then trying to get some males under that cause as well to help Not everybody's gonna be in the same boat, because sometimes they're like, it doesn't affect me, why should I care? Make me care. Because that way, if it's an issue that is cared by everyone, administration's gonna care a little bit more. Universities is something that I've always had an issue with, just because it is like that, but it's not impossible. Don't allow yourself to stray away from the agenda, and then remind yourself, this is why I want this. Because if you add a why, and you feel like a motivation behind it, you're more likely to do it, versus because the brain is a tricky thing. They'll say, well, I don't really need that raise because maybe I'm good the way I'm at. Well, I am surviving based on how it is. I don't need that extra dollar. You need that extra dollar. You deserve that extra dollar. You do the work. Why should Susan from accounting over there get the same, like $2 when you only get the $1? No. Advocate for yourself. You deserve it. A lot of the times we forget that we are the most important thing in our lives, and we are the one that we need to take care of because no one else is.
The imposter syndrome is not a statistical, diagnostical, psychiatric diagnosis. I've always had problems with accepting that term because I think it comes from the dominant society. While it may seem that we have a little intimidation, we certainly have every right to be at the table. And I wouldn't put a label like that on anyone. You are not an imposter. You belong there. You deserve to be at the table by God.
I think an imposter syndrome derives from what we've been exposed to and what our norms are. If we are normalizing that we surround ourselves with people that are lesser than, that think that they're lesser than, that we've seen that there's no role models out there that look like us, that speak like us, that act like us, then we feel that we don't belong in that situation. So we feel like, well, why should I do this? I assimilate to this person and this group of people that I don't see up there. So this is hard for me, maybe I don't belong here. But just because it's difficult, just because no one's there, doesn't mean you don't belong there. Maybe you're the person that deserves to be there, so that you can then inspire somebody else to go that path.
And that's why it's so important to come to a place like Namba, who validates you, recognizes you, accepts you, and supports you.
Exactly, and I'll tell you my success story. So, the reason I got my doctorate degree is because I came to this conference 3 years ago, and I met a lot of doctors, and I had somebody presenting out there who said, you guys can be the next doctors of tomorrow. And I was like, why not? So then I went and got enrolled in my doctorate degree, I got in and I became a doctor. So it's like you sometimes have to be the first one. I'm the first one in my whole family to get a doctorate degree. But because of it, now I have nieces and nephews that are like, hey, I can do that too.
Yeah.
So I have to be able to do it. Yeah.
And I think just as saying that, right, because I think sometimes we think like, well, if this is what I should be doing, it should feel good.
Yeah.
But I think recognizing that you have to speak up and to find your voice, and that sometimes the pendulum will swing from like passivity to aggression, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because it's not, you know, it's a skill, but that it's uncomfortable and it's okay to feel uncomfortable.
Yes.
Like I feel right now.
Exactly. You're gonna do the best you can based on the resources you have that day. So if you didn't sleep well, if you didn't eat well, if you're not like having a good day because something happened at home, all of that contributes on how you're gonna act that day. And be graceful and be understanding of yourself and kind to yourself. That if I was passive aggressive today, that was today. Tomorrow, I'll do better. Yeah. And we have like 5 more minutes. I'll just take 2 more questions. Yeah.
What do you do if you are constantly feeling like you're being gaslit and then you start to believe it?
Okay. So. So 2 things. Make sure you document everything. Reflect on exactly like the when, how, and what, and then have those conversations with them. And then write yourself and know whether or not that's actually true or not of your circumstance. The reason sometimes we allow people to gaslight us, one, we're not expecting it, and sometimes if it happens over and over and over again in the interlevel authority, we tend to, like I said, look up to people higher than us, but doesn't mean that because they're higher than us, they know better. They're humans. Sometimes they can also make mistakes. Doesn't give them the right to mistreat you or to invalidate what you're saying. And just know that what you need to say is valid. No one can tell you what you're feeling. No one can tell you what you think is right or wrong. Only you can, but write down everything and then journal about it after, and then have the conversation with those individuals so it stops. And if it doesn't work, then start bringing like HR and other people in, but have that documentation. So one last thing before I take one more question. not even waiting. One thing that I did with the performance evaluations is something I recommend everybody to do. Start a success journal. Every time that you accomplish something, big or small, with a client, with a coworker, you created a resource, you found a new resource, whatever it may be, write it down, the date, time, and what you did, and how it benefited the organization. All of these little points you'll have ready when your employee evaluation comes in, and now you have documented evidence to argue whether or not you deserve that 3 that everybody likes to get, or that 4, or that 5. But that way you have documented that. So that's another good point.
I was just gonna say, like, what about conversations when you're, like, the other party is, like, when it feels like there's no compromise because the other party is not, like, validating your identity or anything like that, like, if you're querying or talking to somebody that's, like, blatantly homophobic, like, are there compromises that you can have there, like, negotiations, or, like, at what point do you just, like, can walk away? Because I feel like sometimes, like, I'm pushed to have, like, these conversations and maybe I don't really want to, and I don't know if it's, like, a personal boundary, if it's, like, a professional or something like that.
You have to be able to make it known and kind of know what is my absolute minimum that I want to leave from this conversation. If you want them to respect your pronouns, respect your identity, your label, that's what you have to leave. And if they're not willing to have that conversation, then that's maybe someone that you need to step away from and then involve other people to kind of respect you. 1, it's illegal. 2, like I said, you matter, so you have to be your biggest advocate. So if you notice that the conversation is going round and round, you're not really going anywhere with it, step away. Say, hey, this is not going anywhere. Let's wait a little bit longer until we're less heated, and let's start this again. And if you notice that verbal communication not working for them, then do email, do text. That way you also have it, write it down, and you have it documented. Some people it's not good to talk to, but they're really good at it. If you notice that they suddenly start performing well when you email them. I have a couple role plays, but I have to. I like to kind of like go with whatever the questions you have, so it can be beneficial for you. But just know that in order for you to be able to continue this, surround yourself with people that are already are willing to practice or already are assertive. Make sure that you have someone, an accountability person at work, where you ask them, hey, can you please keep me accountable to speak up my mind? Can you please keep me accountable if you ever notice that I'm being like over talked to or something like that? Create a support system where you're at, so that way you don't do it yourself. Sometimes we come out of this inspired and we leave this room, we're like, I'm gonna do it. And then we get to the workplace and we stop. So keep someone that is accountable, seek for a mentor, a coach, or if you need to go through a therapist to help you go through whatever those barriers that's stopping you from reaching that level of assertiveness and communication you wanna do. And out of everything that we talked about today, I just want you to know you all matter. You all are worthy of the rights, of the respect that you deserve, and don't leave over here expecting less. Like I said, just because they're saying you're too much, ask them to seek less, you do more. Okay?